Today, I want to talk to you about leather. I think that leather can seem like a bit of an arcane craft. The tools are specialized and strange. The knowledge locked away in hard-to-acquire books are kept safe in the hands of master artisans. Perhaps the mystique or the age of this craft contributes to this impression. But in reality, I found quite the opposite to be true. Once I began leatherworking, I found it to be intuitive. The tools are not so strange when explained thoughtfully. The techniques, though specialized, feel so natural to the material. My goal with this introductory project is to provide an open door, to demystify the world of leathercraft and its associated tools. To show a diverse project taken from hide to completion. Hopefully, by the end, you'll see leather the way I see it, a canvas brimming with possibilities. Firstly, let's take a look at the pattern. The first piece is the front panel. The second piece is both the back panel and the top flap. It and the front panel make up the body of the pouch. The next piece is the side panel, which gives the pouch volume. Lastly, we have the small pocket, which will be sewing to the front panel. I'll be working with 4 to 5 ounce veg-tanned leather. Ounces of leather denotes how thick the hide is. 4 ounces is a very reasonable size for pouches. When laying out the patterns on the hide, avoid holes and imperfections. Unlike with fabric, we have no grain to worry about, so pattern pieces can nest in any orientation. I prefer to keep them in place with pattern weights to avoid marring the leather surface. To minimize waste, I'll nest the pieces as closely as I'm comfortable cutting. Some skilled craftspeople may have edges align exactly, but I don't trust my own straight-edge cutting quite that much. Let's trace the pattern. I understand using a gel pen on leather might be a bit controversial. As a mixed media craftsperson, I simply believe that if a tool has worked for me, I should use it. If I'll ever need it, I'll invest in something different. But for this project, a pen works perfectly. I can't forget to trace the punch holes as well. We'll need these holes for hand stitching later. Drawing the entire hole makes placing the punch much more accurate. I'll get the entire pattern traced before I do any cutting. Years of sewing has taught me that the most successful tracing comes from a steady, gentle hand. Here's what the entire pattern looks like traced. Let's clean up the workspace in preparation to cut. I cut thin leather using a pair of sharp, treaded scissors. Don't worry, these aren't my fabric scissors. Treaded scissors help me cut more cleanly and squarely. They leave me with an edge that is just a little less fuzzy. That being said, they are much harder on my hands. If I feel any tendon fatigue, I take a break. Another way to cut leather is with a knife. This is a skillful method that requires a very sharp knife to do safely. Another cutting option I've seen is a laser cutter. I don't have access to a laser cutter, but I imagine it creates a very precise edge. Here are the pattern pieces all cut out. From my cutting, I'll keep any of the larger scraps. I'll need them later for sampling tools or practicing stitching. The next step will be punching the stitch holes. I have 2 tool options, a single drive punch and a punch wheel. The drive punch is easier on the hands, so I'll use that. Make sure to use an impact surface while punching holes so as not to ruin the table. Here, I line up the drive punch on the hole and then hammer with a mallet. The punch tool is quite sharp, so just a few swings is enough to punch through. I try to do as few swings as possible. I discovered I could usually punch through with one swing. To punch as quickly as possible, I don't put the mallet down between swings. Here's what the pieces look like with all of the sewing holes punched. Next up, I'll prepare to carve. I need the design pattern, the leather flap, a pencil, plain water, scotch tape, and either a towel or a sponge. First, I need to wet the surface of the leather. This will soften the surface, making it carvable. Let's lay the pattern on top. I very gently tape the paper down to keep it in place. Now I'm going to trace the design using a pencil. A stylus can be used as well since the pattern is transferred via pressure. I prefer to use a pencil so I can see what I've traced. After the pattern is removed, we can see that the design has been carved out. The first step in carving will involve a swivel knife. The knife is held via a saddle. Once again, I'll start by wetting the leather. The proper way to use a swivel knife is to sink the corner of the knife into the leather surface. Then, drag the knife towards the body to score the surface of the leather. The knife works best when very sharp, but it's important to work slowly and maintain control. I've cut out the entire design. I will begin stamping with the cedar. The cedar creates a small, deep circle. In traditional designs, it's used to create the middle of a flower. I like to start with it since it's quick. Next, I will grab the Beveler stamp. The Beveler creates a crisp, shadowed edge. To use the Beveler, I position the long side of the stamp into the knife cut. It creates depth in the design. I'll drag the edge beveler along any cut edge I want to shadow. I use this stamp quite a bit. The depth of the shadow is controlled by how hard the stamp is struck. Sometimes, to darken the shadow, I'll stamp the area twice. The Beveler stamp really brings the design to life. The final stamp I will be using is the Pear Shader. The Pear Shader creates a more subtle, shallow shadow. By dragging a Pear Shader while stamping, a long area of shadow can be created. The softness of the Pear Shader really adds a lot of dimensionality to the piece. The carving is done. Before I go any further, I'm going to add some holes for decorative lacing. I held off on these holes so as to not interfere with the carving. Let's mark them. For easy lacing, I need these holes to be slightly larger. At my previous job, we called the rotary punch a ka-chunk. So that's what I call it now. I think we are ready to do some finishing. I've let the leather dry overnight. I'll begin by finishing the leather edges. This edge dressing will harden the cut edges and keep them from being too fuzzy. Using a small brush, I'm applying edge finish very carefully, just to the edges. This will help the edges look just a little bit nicer. There are many other ways to edge finish, but I find this to be a great beginner method. Before doing any further finishing, let the edges dry fully. Everything to do on the unstained leather has been done, so it is time to stain. I will be using Tandy Leather's EcoFlow water stain. I am applying this with a soft flat brush. Leather daubers and foam brushes are also great options. Very important, glove up. Staining is messy and it's best not to get it on bare skin. One reason I love water stain is that it can be diluted with water. I prefer to do a few thinner, lighter layers of the stain. Let's begin. You'll notice I apply in quick circular motions. While it's possible to get a very even dye with EcoFlow, you can also achieve a very textured, mottled look with it. I like the unevenness of a circular application. Sometimes I'll apply in long, even brush strokes to get a more directional application. The fun of leather is that no two projects will look the same. I'm going to leave the design a little lighter than the surrounding area. Let's pull out a detail brush and darken some of those designs' shadows. Because of how we will be sewing, I'm going to hit the inside edges with a little dye as well. I have lots of fun experimenting with application and textures. There's just so much to discover. After applying, let's let it dry overnight. Now, let's apply a top coat. This top coat will add a shine and help protect the surface. I'll apply with the same brush I used to stain with. A dauber can also be used. I'm going to work it into the leather a bit to work out those bubbles. I'll usually apply 2 or more layers of top coat. Once again, I'll let this dry fully. How exciting! It's time to assemble. Let's begin with some waxed thread. I'll be using 2 harness needles. I'll start with sewing on the front pocket. Let's cut 1 continuous thread. I'll cut it to be 4 times the length of the seam. This will leave me with just a little bit extra. Now I'll thread both needles. To anchor the needle, I'll split the thread and pull the needle through. This will prevent the needle from coming unthreaded. Then I'll pull tight. I'll do the exact same thing to the other needle on the other end of the thread. Now I'll begin saddle stitching. First, take the thread through the first hole of both layers. Pull that thread so that it splits about evenly on either side of the project. Put the first needle through the second hole of both layers from the front. Now, both needles should be on the back of the project. From the back, put the second needle through the second hole of both layers. Pull it to the front. This is the basic saddle stitch. I'll repeat this around the entire seam. Another way I like to think of the saddle stitch is as a running stitch done on both sides of the project simultaneously. Make sure to pull tight as you go to make sure the seam stays flush. The saddle stitch looks so nice on both sides. It also makes for a very durable seam. As the seam gets further along, it becomes easier. To finish off, I'll do a back stitch. Reverse the saddle stitch and go back a few holes. Stop a few stitches down with both threads on the back of the project. Use a lighter to melt the ends, finishing the thread and anchoring it to the inside. Please be cautious with lighters, don't touch the melted threads with your hands. Look, our first seam. Before the next seam, I'm going to install part of the closure. I'll be using 2 pairs of small quick rivets. The closure I'm using is this beautiful swing clasp from Tandy Leather. I'll be using my rivet setter. For now, we only need the bottom of the clasp. I'll start by putting the back of the rivets through the closure holes. Place the bottom of the closure. Now I can pop on the top of the rivets. Let's set these rivets. A well-fitted rivet should sink down easily when set. Nice. It's important to get quick rivets that are an appropriate length for a project. They should fit easily, but not loosely, before being set. Here is the bottom of the closure. The rivets feel snug, but not overly so. I can't wait to see the top of the closure. But actually, it's time to get back to stitching. The next seam will involve the side panel. I'll cut a thread 4 times the side panel's length. Just like last time, I need 2 harness needles. One is prepared on each end of the thread. Let's begin stitching in the side panel. For a curved piece like the side panel, I keep water handy. Applying a little water to the seam line will make it more malleable. It will curve more easily. Now to saddle stitch the entire seam. Once again, softening up the side panel will help make this curve. I like to fold the damp seam around and down. It can take a minute or so for the leather to fully soften. The first curve to me is the hardest part to stitch. The second curve feels a lot easier. I love wearing jewelry, but maybe today a bracelet wasn't the right choice. Here's that curve, all sewn. I finished the sewing with a back stitch just like before. A lighter or a little glue will hold these ends in place. There, the hardest line of stitching is done. There is only one line of stitching left. Let's stitch the side panel to the flap. I find this seam much easier than the previous. The side panel is already held in place. The curves feel easier too, since the other side is already done. A tool that makes stitching easier is a stitching pony. I think it's a worthy investment if you plan to saddle stitch often. I do have one, but I wanted this project to be accessible to leather beginners. A stitching pony isn't a requirement for getting into leather. I finished this seam with the customary backstitch. A little fire to keep it in place. All of the stitching is done. I think the saddle stitch just looks so handsome. It's just such a pretty stitch. Let's do a little decorative lacing. I've cut about 60 inches for this project. I'm using super glue to harden one end. This will make lacing a little easier. Now I'm going to glue the other end into the seam of the leather. Let's begin lacing with a very basic type, the whip stitch. I pull the lace through the hole, wrapping the lace around the edge of the leather. Let's do the whole edge. While this lacing is entirely decorative, lacing can also be used to do functional leather stitching. Lacing is a great option for bulky seams that need extra strength. I'm going to finish this lacing by gluing the excess into the seam. Our decorative lacing is finished. There's one final step left. Let's grab 2 more pairs of rapid rivets. I've put off installing the top of the closure to the very end. Let's put the bottom half of the rivets through the holes. The closure fits right between them. Pop the rivet caps on. Using the rivet setter, let's fully set these rivets. I've left this to last so as to not interfere with the lacing. It's done. Let's look at the final project. The point of this project is not complete mastery of any particular leather technique. Rather, it's to introduce a full breadth of leather techniques to beginners. Some of the well-established artisan crafts can feel very hard to get into. Hopefully, this video and project has equipped you with the courage and knowledge to try leathercraft yourself. Leather may seem intimidating, but once I got into it, I found it to be very rewarding. I have also found the leatherwork community to be very welcoming to experienced craftspeople and beginners alike. I hope this video has been helpful. Thank you so much for joining me.